to the culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, media, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. Documenting our Black powerful history and amplifying our Black voices, one interview at a time. We are the culture.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Culture. I am your host, Jessica Garrett-Modkins, and joining us is Senator Dwight Bullard of Politics for the Culture. I love this mashup that we're doing.
I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here again. We were excited when we talked last time because of all the news and buzz around your soror,
yes,
Harris.
yes.
And all the things there. But, wanted to make sure we came back to talk about local politics because at the end of the day, all politics is local.
Yes, it is. And today is the first day of early voting across Miami-Dade County. It's a number of significant races that are going on. I was able to pull a sample ballot to kind of lead our discussion, if that's okay with 100%. You. Okay, so and as you all can see, we're jumping right into it. If you're joining us from Facebook, X, Instagram, IG, let us know what your questions are. We'll get them on, and our political advisor will give us some insight into your questions. So we'll start off. Let's see. This first race is United States Senator. You have Stanley Campbell, Rod Joseph, Debbie Powell, Brian Rush. What are your thoughts on it? And of course, this is a sample ballot, so my slate is going to be a little different from all of the others because, of course, isn't this also Jimenez's seat?
Well, no, this is Rick Scott's seat.
Rick Scott's seat. That's what I was going to say.
And so just want to, remind folks on some just basic logistic stuff. Every ballot across the country is structured federal races first, followed by state races, then followed by your local races. So I just want to remind folks because, especially for this ballot, we have the Miami-Dade County mayor, which I'm sure we're going to get to. We got sheriff for the first time in 60 years. And so I don't want people to be kind of like hit with some shock and awe, like, right, where's this person I was looking for? You got to go down. Vote through the ballot. So the race you brought up, currently Senator Rick Scott is one of our United States senators here in the state of Florida. Served as our governor, now serves in the U.S. Senate. He's up for re-election, and he has a bevy of challenges. You've named them. Stanley Campbell, a longtime federal employee, has been doing a lot of work in D.C. for quite some time. If you recognize the last name, as many folks should, that is our very own Luther Campbell's brother. Older brother. And not that should have a sway either way, but just so folks know that he does have strong ties to Miami. Grew up here, but again, worked at a number of federal agencies over a long career in federal government. Rod Joseph, Haitian American, again, not to sway anybody either way, but for those who recognize history, Florida's never had a Black U.S. Senator. Florida's never had a Haitian U.S. Senator. So both gentlemen are running on the side of history. But then we also have Debbie Mercoso Powell. If you're familiar with her name, she was or did serve in Congress for a brief time, 2018 to 2020. Again, another history maker in her own right because of Florida has never had a woman U.S. Senator either. So these are all potential opportunities to make history for folks, but that is the Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate.
And then you have Brian.
Huh?
There's one other Democratic, Brian Rush.
Almost forgot. Brian Rush, little lesser known, but, equally someone who wants to kind of vie for that position. I would say that Mr. Rush isn't from South Florida. The other three are. So for those folks who are, from Miami-Dade, you may be a little more familiar with or have seen the signage for Mr. Campbell, Mr. Joseph, or Dr. Joseph, and Congresswoman Mercoso Powell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
But
she's no, it's okay. That's okay. That's good. Any more closing thoughts on that race?
Not just reminding folks to do your research. Like, again, because of the nature of the show, I voted today. I know a lot of folks probably watching like, do I just tell me who to vote for? And if folks, hit me up in the DMs, hit me up on Instagram, I'd be happy to share my thoughts. But because of communications responsibilities and laws, I want to protect my good friend Jessica by knowing it's about.
Well, I will say this: the culture will be releasing a slate. We will be releasing a slate. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, now's a great time to do so. Head on over to theculture.xyz and you'll be on the list. You'll get that in your inbox next Monday. And we'll try to help you out as much as you can, much as we can. Yes.
And again, my IG handle is right there at the bottom of the screen. So if folks have specific questions or just
Bonita,
straight up want to ask who I need to vote for, I'll be happy to answer it.
Right.
In the DMs.
In the DM. So then we have a District 27 for Congress.
Yeah, Mike Davey versus Lucia Baez Geller. Both, credible candidates. This is, as you pointed out, the seat that is currently occupied by Congresswoman Salazar, not Congressman Jimenez. So this is a particular neck of the woods. It covers downtown through southern Miami-Dade. But again, currently, Lucia is on the school board. She currently represents District 3 on the Miami-Dade School Board. For those who are familiar with her term of service. Mike Davey is also someone folks may be familiar with. I want to say he was the mayor of one of the coastal municipalities, either Surfside or Golden Beach, and I do apologize for not being super ready. But again, these are folks that the reason I emphasize both of them having served in public office is they both have a record, they both have websites, and people can easily Google search what they've been about, statements they've made, positions that they've taken, and why they're up for the fight to take on Congresswoman Salazar.
Yes. And also, you can go to Miami-Dade County and request your sample ballot so that you're more familiar with what's going to happen once you enter that voting booth, and you're not taken back, and you can walk in there with your sample ballot filled out.
Yeah.
And even if you did the vote by mail, you can take it in with you. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No. I was just piggybacking on what you were saying. I want to remind folks that the county website allows you to actually create your personal sample ballot. So when you go on to Miami-Dade elections, you'll see a link that says My Sample Ballot. They'll ask you a few questions like where you live, your zip code, so that you can actually look at what your ballot specifically will look like. And I just want to acknowledge some of the races that we're going over. We're talking about the Democratic slate. Republicans have an opportunity to pick candidates for those positions as well, or for certain other positions. For those that are non-party affiliated, you also are voting in this election, even though we're talking about, we've talked about Democratic candidates thus far. Judges, school board members, the mayor are all considered nonpartisan. So I don't want people to feel as though because it's framed as the August primary that not everyone gets a chance to get a ballot. Anybody who's a registered voter in Miami-Dade County, anyone who's a registered voter in Florida, because I also want to acknowledge that August 20th is the statewide primary. So whether you are in Escambia County, Pensacola, all the way down to Monroe County, in Key West, you have elections coming up in August. And one thing I want to also acknowledge for those folks who do have vote-by-mail ballots is you can actually drop your vote-by-mail ballot in person. They have drop-off sites at the early voting locations for you to do that if you're one of those people who's skittish about the mail and whether or not your ballot will make it there. You can actually drop it off on site at any of the early voting locations.
And on that Miami-Dade County election site, it will tell you where the early voting locations are. It's probably more of a surefire way to make sure that they receive your vote by mail ballot. And you can go back to the website to check and make sure that who you voted for is who you're accredited with after they receive it. That's just a little fun fact that I found out doing research.
You actually track it like you do a package.
Yeah.
To make sure they have it and that they've processed it. So a lot of convenient ways to do it. All this stuff is also mobile friendly for folks who don't have access to laptops and computers. So I just, one of the things, and I do, again, appreciate you giving us time and space to talk about this, is a lot of people get this anxiety and urgency around voting. Elections are important. I do not deny that. Every election is important. I do not deny that either. But I just want to remind folks that the utility of voting, the ease of voting, should be something you always think about. People always get, caught up in the, does my vote matter? Does my vote count? It does. I want to say that blanketly, especially in these races, because these are local races. Oftentimes these races boil down to a couple hundred votes, maybe a couple dozen votes might separate the winner from the loser. And so I just want to remind folks that this time is, in my humble opinion, local elections are more important in many cases than federal elections. But for whatever reason, we get a lower turnout in August than we do in November. And I get that. A lot of TV money is being spent. A lot of advertising money is being spent to remind people about the November election, which, again, is important. But August is important. And I also want to remind folks, it's easy. I did it today, parked my car. From the time I parked my car to the time I got back to my car, it took me less than 10 minutes. All right. So I just want to remind folks, that this isn't a complicated exercise. This isn't something that should be cumbersome. Take your driver's license or some sort of photo ID. Go in there. They'll confirm who you are. You go do it. Put it in the printer. Get your sticker.
And then if you have questions about needing accessibility or any of those things, you can always dial 311. And the helpful folks there from Miami-Dade County can help and navigate you. If you don't have access to a computer or don't know how necessarily to go to the website for Miami-Dade County on your cell phone, go to a library. There are librarians there who can help you through the process and or go to an early voting site. After you call 311 and you find out where you're supposed to go, I see Senator.
Oh, no, I was saying those are oftentimes one and the same. So I just wanted to remind folks.
Yes.
That the early voting sites are oftentimes libraries.
Libraries, yeah. Okay, so let's see. Where do we leave off? All right. Sheriff. I have the ballot for the Democrats. So I see John Barrow.
Barrow. Mm-hmm.
Barrow, okay. Susan
Corey.
Ricky Mitchell,
Mm-hmm.
James Reyes.
Yes. Yes. So folks have probably been inundated with signs and flyers for sheriff, because in total, there are 12 people running for sheriff, 8 on the Republican side, 4 on the Democratic side. And again, this is one of those scenarios where you have to have picked the party. But for those 4 folks, you have John Barrow in service with the Miami-Dade Police Department. I think rose to the rank of major, I believe, in the police department. So long tenure service, someone you want to look into, African-American male. Susan Corey, I've known Susan for a number of years. We actually served on a committee in trying to get police accountability. So she was pivotal in helping to push to get the independent civilian panel that we have here in Miami-Dade County. So again, do your research. Ricky Mitchell, again, serves with the police department as well, but is now a small business owner from Miami, also African-American. And then James Reyes, who is our current director of public safety here in Miami-Dade County. For those who don't know, we don't have an elected sheriff. This will be the first time we're doing that. The sheriff will be basically in charge of the police department, the county police department, as well as the county jails. But the current director of public safety is in charge of corrections, police, fire, and EMTs. And so that is Mr. Reyes' current role. But
he's kind of already doing it.
He's basically already doing the job. Yeah. So
I had a question about this, because for 60 some odd years, we haven't had this. Why was it something that they deemed necessary at this time?
Well, this is, again, why folks need to do their research. Back in 2018, there were a number of ballot initiatives put on the ballot by a constitutional revision commission. This is every 20 years, the state puts these folks together to see if there are components in our Constitution that they deem important. And so they put something on the ballot that basically mandated that certain constitutional offices would all be elected. So now everyone's going to be voting on tax collector, sheriff, supervisor of elections, clerk of courts. I'm trying to see if I'm missing any one of them. Yeah. So those offices now will be elected positions. For us in Miami-Dade County, we had already been electing a clerk of courts. But the clerk of courts used to serve as the clerk and the tax collector. They've broken those folks up. Now you have a tax collector. Supervisor elections used to be appointed. Now you have to elect that person. And now you also have to elect the office of sheriff. And it's partisan. So, and I just want to remind folks of that, especially for those folks who are non-party affiliated, is that you will be able to vote on the sheriff in November, but you cannot vote for the partisan offices in August, unfortunately.
Let's take this quick little break and we'll be right back.
The August 20th primary election. It's your voice and your vote, so make it count. Request your vote by mail ballot before August 8th. Easily track and confirm your vote online. Take action at miamidade.gov/elections or call 311.
That's so funny. It said everything that we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
Oh gosh, and that wasn't even on purpose. That's just a commercial for right now. That's great. Okay, so and you just talked about this supervisor of elections.
Yeah.
I have the Democratic candidates, but I don't have Republicans.
No problem. I know Willis Howard, again, long time, been in campaigns for quite some time, active on helping to run campaigns, and so has decided to run for office himself. African-American male running for the office. You also have J.C. Planes, Juan Carlos Planes, by the surname, Latino, is unapologetic about reminding folks that he was a Republican, but converted to a Democrat because he just didn't like how the Republicans were rolling. So now he's a registered Democrat running for office. I'm sure folks might have seen the commercials and the radio ads calling him out about that. Now, I will say for the third person in that race, not as familiar with their track record. Not to say that they're not viable or potentially qualified. But again, this is why I remind folks to do their research. Yeah.
There are a number of judge races, too many, quite frankly, for me to sit here and try to read.
Yeah, I won't take you through that, even though people are like, I'm freaking out about judges. Here's what I would say. Here are the numbers, and I want to give people this kind of like, as you're Googling, as you're checking these folks out, about 70% of judges have a prosecutor's background. And this is just the kind of national average, kind of correlates to what we see at the county level as well. And again, prosecutors, defense. You have to know, who's who, right? So what I would say is that right now you have an overwhelming number of folks who have a prosecutorial background who are running for judge. Oftentimes, when people think about judges, there's the person bangs the gavel, gives people time for their sentences, and all that is true. But when we think about criminal systems reform, we think about what we've seen happening, longer sentences being given to Black people disproportionately. You need to diversify the judiciary. So if you have 70% of those folks who are accustomed to locking people up, you're going to continue to see that trend. So you might want to start electing more people who have a defense background, or maybe even have an academic background. Folks who, were professors at law school, gender and ethnicity are important as well. Right now in the 11th circuit, which is the circuit for Miami-Dade, there's only two Haitian American judges in the entire circuit, one male, one female. So I want you to think about that lack of diversity in terms of who's going to sit in front of these folks. So on this list, you have, Latinas, Latinas in terms of Hispanic women, Hispanic men, some white men, some black folks, Black males, Black women. Again, I'm not telling folks how they go about making their decision, but if your decision is rooted in some level of diversity, encourage you to Google. The pictures will pop up. You'll see who these folks are. And again, want to remind folks about their background. Background is important because, again, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be different than you're used to, you have to be able to vote different and make that determination. But again, hit me in the DMs. I got judge recommendations too.
Mayor, this is it.
Yeah. And it's a long list.
It is a long list.
People are going to be really kind of shocked because I'm going to be like, I didn't know that there are this many people
Right.
for mayor. And a lot of it, I'll give Mayor Levine Cava credit in the sense that she has been around. A lot of folks are accustomed to seeing her pop up everywhere.
Everywhere.
Whether it be at Jazz in the Gardens, whether it's Zoo Miami, she tends to pop up everywhere, and that's a credit to her. But again, if people could be dissatisfied, for me, I think presence matters, and the fact that she's been quite present. So take that for what it is. But for these other folks that are running, none of the current folks running are mayors, if that makes sense. And what people are like, well, what do you mean by that? So Miami-Dade has 30 plus municipalities, as well as the county, as well as a 13-person county commission. So that means that there are 30 other mayors, right? 30 plus other mayors out there for these smaller towns, villages, and cities, none of whom decided to run for mayor, right? So again, let that speak for what it is. But I just want to remind folks that, again, you have every right to vote for who you choose to vote for, but you have a lot of folks running for mayor that have never held public office before, no real ties to the county that they can speak of, against somebody who's nothing else been miss everywhere.
That's true. Now, these races are not on this ballot, but they're pretty big. The mayor of Miami Gardens is up. Are you familiar with that race? Have you been seeing anything?
I am. I mean, for the folks up there in Miami Gardens, like what comes around, and I'm sure everybody's going to see all the food trucks and the bands and the DJs right there in North Dade Library. You're gonna get a chance to figure it out. I mean, for Miami Gardens, a lot of things have happened over the last couple years that people have kind of given people pause, made people question. Depends on how you feel about things like Formula One coming to the city. How people feel about the expansion of Dolphin Stadium, how people feel about some of the construction and new development that they have there in Miami Gardens. Again, this is one of those things where you really have to call the question on what do you want to see and what you want your city to look like. And that really applies to any city that has elections coming up. But I know Miami Gardens is one of the largest cities in the county.
And the state for Blacks.
Absolutely. Largest Black city south of Atlanta. So important reminder to everybody of the impact of that city. And again, a lot of future impact as well. They're already proposing the Metro Rail to go run up into Miami Gardens for folks. So there's going to be
that's on the petition.
Questions around that and where you want to see your city go. Again, I don't live in Miami Gardens. I'll be the first to say that. I have natural opinions and affinity towards particular members of the Miami Gardens City Council and the mayor's seat because I've known them for a while. Happy to talk it through with folks. But again, I remind folks to kind of think about what they want to see for their city. Do they like the direction it's going in? If you like the direction it's going in, then you know how to vote. If you don't, then you have another opportunity to vote differently.
Yeah. And then Hardeman, Edmondson is trying to get reelected. It's been all over the news. Everyone is talking about it. that is a very interesting race, I will say.
To say the least. And I've been to a couple forums, and I think it's safe to say they don't like each other. They do not like each other in the realest way possible. For those folks who've been to them forums in Liberty City, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They have not been silent in terms of how they've
feel about one another.
But again, it's a question of where do you want to go? And there's actually a third person in that race as well.
Who is it?
I forget the gentleman's name, but I don't want to discredit the fact that
okay.
people running in that race. And I also want to lift up, as I mentioned, we have 13 members of the county commission. It's alternating years depending on who's running, but all the odd seats were up this year. All the even seats will be up in 2026. And so I just want to remind folks, when folks are asking questions about who's doing what where, that's what's happening right now, is that the odd numbered seats, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, 11 and 13 are all on the, all up. They're not all on the ballot. Some folks were elected without opposition.
Yeah. District 9, McGee.
Yeah. McGee, Commissioner Gilbert, both were elected without opposition.
And the lady.
And Commissioner Higgins.
Yes.
In District 5. So
not to be confused with Cohen Higgins.
Right.
Who will be up for election next year.
Yeah, next year. So District 3, hotly contested. That covers Little Haiti, Lemon City, Liberty City, Overtown, Upper East Side, a lot of those historic Black neighborhoods in the central part of the county. So again, just want to remind those folks, because we are for the culture, that y'all got some races coming up in that space as well.
There's another with a friend to the show, Ashley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've had her on a number of times.
She's been on, Representative Ashley Gant, running for re-election against two former representatives. And again, it is a question of, do you like the past or do you like the future? Is really the question that's being called in that area. You actually have Roy Hardiman, who's held the office before a few years back in a different district. You also have former Representative James Bush, who Representative Gant defeated 2 years ago, running for that seat as well. So again, you can check their records. You can definitely see what is there. But again, have my thoughts.
I was so surprised that it seemed like the Herald did this whole ad that they chose her over the other candidates, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen a publication push out so much who their choice was for a race like they did with her. I was like, wow, I think that's great.
Well, listen, and this all too well as a fine member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. There are a lot of dope AKAs running for office around the state and around the country. And so if you like the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha, you got pick of the litter. I mean, in Jacksonville, Orlando, and running for the White House.
And speaking of the White House, she was able to secure her votes.
Absolutely. So a lot of folks have been trying to follow what's going on. And, we talked about it last time we had talked, that President Biden stepped down as the Democratic nominee, which created a process to pick a new nominee. And so recently, the DNC did what's called a roll call vote of delegates. So, and it was a virtual roll call vote for delegates. So every state delegation basically hopped on a Zoom, and the question was called on whether or not they wanted to support Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee. And so now she has secured enough delegate votes to be the nominee at the convention taking place in Chicago on the 19th of this month. And so, again, she's not officially, it's always a technical thing where we do a dance. She's not officially the nominee, so you're going to hear folks refer to former President Trump as the Republican nominee. If you recall, they had their convention in July. He was officially nominated, so he is the Republican nominee. Vice President Harris is going to be referred to, at least for the next few weeks, as the presumptive Democratic nominee. And that is until she's officially nominated. So I don't want folks to feel she's being disrespected or slighted or she's not there. Mm-hmm. But the process isn't official until the convention happens later this month.
And Win with Black Women. We had a call last night. That was the national call, and then the statewide call is tonight, led by Yolanda Cass-Jackson. And on the call last night, they mentioned that since the first original call where we had 44,000 people on the Zoom, and in real time, it transferred from a 3,000 capacity Zoom call to a webinar hosting all 44,000. And then there were other subgroups. You had a Clubhouse group, you had YouTube. There were streaming opportunities where friends brought in others so that they could too be able to get this word. As a result of that, they raised $15 million. And yesterday was the group's anniversary. It was their 4th anniversary of Win with Black Women. So they celebrated. You had people on like Shirley Murdoch As We Lay.
I love it. I love it.
She went from As We Lay to the church. Yes, it was good music being played. Good music being played. It was a nice time. But I want to just point out what has happened since that Win with Black Women call. It was the impetus for Black men for Harris, Latinas for Harris, Native women and Two-Spirits for Harris, white dudes for Harris, women for Harris, Caribbean Americans for Harris, Filipino Americans for Harris. Now, all of this is happening on Zoom. Right. It is a movement, Disabled Voters for Harris. Cats and Dogs Unite for Kamala Harris for president. Latino Men for Harris. School board members for Kamala. Jewish Americans for Kamala Harris. Labor for Harris. Black Tech Matters Night of Action. Dads for Kamala. First Ladies United for Kamala Harris. South Asian. And when I tell you the comedians for Harris.
And I
for Harris.
And I can't let the local Black women, take all the oxygen. Shout out to the formalized Black Men Win, which was a number of Black men who are organizing. Organizing.
Dwight.
Yeah. Huh?
I didn't say that.
I'm saying local Black Men Win. Like,
okay.
Black Men for Harris national call.
Right.
But here in Miami-Dade County, group of us got together and
you have an event coming up.
Big event at Ives Estates Park on the 25th. We're calling all brothers from the Tri-County area to come out. We're treating it like a tailgate. Mm-hmm. Come out, get the message, hang out, celebrate, little Black boy joy. in the mix, but also at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're in lockstep with what we need to do come November.
Yes, and our next call to action is for everyone to come on one Zoom. All of these affinity groups. Someone asked.
I don't know if Zoom got that kind of capacity.
They said they were interested in breaking it, so we're just Zoom. But what someone raised the question as to, oh, this is so divisive, blacks and men and Latinas and white dudes and black. There was, I don't know, I can't speak for each one of the groups, but I know that for ours, there was a healing process that went on within that group. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, I want to get married when you're not whole. Right. Two cannot join if one is fractured. So organically, that was the process of what has happened with us unifying from all different race, ethnicities, genders, industries. You have HBCU Alliance or something like that for Kamala. You had Hamptonians for Kamala, HU for Kamala. So my point is that there had to be this healing process before we could come together as one, because the world is very fractured right now, and there's a lot of divisiveness that's going on. I think that we as a group, different groups, needed to come together, heal from that, and then come together all for those who are willing and want to get Kamala Harris into office.
Yeah. And I think even deeper is this is a lesson that we learned after President Obama, right? Everyone remembers distinctly 2008, all the excitement, and everyone got on TV and was like, we're in a post-racial society now. We don't see color anymore. And that's just a misnomer. That's incorrect. I think for people who are of varying backgrounds, multiracial, particular ethnic groups, language groups, etc., it's not a question of, I don't want you to see me for who I am. It's very much, I want you to see me for who I am. And I want you to understand, respect, and appreciate how I got to where I am, and this idea of, well, we want to be a colorblind society. That ain't it.
No.
That ain't it. Like, it's not plausible. It's dishonest if we're going to be straight up about it. That in a country that is so deeply structured in a racial dynamic, that all of a sudden you're going to be like, let's cast all that aside.
Right. Right.
And so, to your point, for those groups, it is, how do you organize your people? Especially when, and let's be clear, the division, the divide, the angst, the violence is really kind of being perpetrated by a particular individual who's leading a group of folks who really want to see the country in its worst possible way, right? Yeah, I mean, just the idea of saying something like "Make America Great Again" is intellectually dishonest and disrespectful to the people who made the country what it is,
yes,
but who have never had full access to the possibilities.
You can ready to start a whole nother show
that other folks have. I need people to understand that. I mean, just the, for those who watch Breaking Bad, Bryan Cranston, who was the lead character in that, it's a viral clip where he's like, I really had to process it as a white guy. He's like, when someone comes along and says, "Make America Great Again," what does that sound like to a black person? What does that sound like to an Asian American? Like, point to the time in history where things were great for them in order to be great again. Mm-hmm. So for, lesbian, bisexual folk, when point to the year, like, point to the year where, are you going to say just because Michael Jackson's Thriller album came out in 83 that's when?
That's when.
That's when everything was great.
Yeah, the curl that came down. Yeah.
So that's let's, like, if we're going to be aspirational about what this country can be, let's be aspirational about it. But we also have to acknowledge that there's been a lot of harm to a lot of people that we still gotta work through and still gotta heal from. So
yes. Still a lot more for us to unpack too. So you can come and have lunch with us again next Monday, same time. But next Monday we're going to start at 12. We're going to start at 12. We're not going to have any technical glitches. No one is going to do anything to stop us from having lunch with you next Monday at noon, right here. Same group. We're going to be right here. We know something else is going to go down, and we're going to be right here to talk about it.
Absolutely. But again, just want to remind folks, early voting has started, folks. Early voting has started. In Miami-Dade this week, it's 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. This weekend, you'll have an opportunity to early vote at all those locations. Then next week, the time flips, and it goes from, I believe, noon to 7.
So let me give it to you. It is this week it's 7 until 3, and then next week it's 11 until 7, starting on August the 12th. Through Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday. But we'll remind you of this next week. It is from 8 to 4 on the weekends, 8 to 4 on Saturday and Sunday. So much information. We just want to be servants. We just want to help you. That's all we're here for. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rockstar Media and is distributed by the Culture Media Group. It cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent. All